Morning, everybody. This is Mr. Rader. This is the lesson for AP World History on the article War and the Environment by Richard Tucker. Today is really just a preparation lesson. We're going to give you time to read the article and to consider what is the relationship between wars in human history and the environmental landscapes. And since we are preparing remotely, I am going to give you a full day to kind of think through and read the article itself. There will be a discussion/seminar tomorrow on Zoom. It should take place at around 2 p.m. And our historical thinking skill for the day will be continuity and change over time. So, for the opening question, I'd like you to kind of consider what you already know about the environmental consequences of war and what you would want to know more about. So when we think about war and the environment has been directly affected by warfare throughout human history. So if you look at these two images on the lower right-hand corner, we see a plane that is releasing Agent Orange into the environment of Vietnam during the Vietnam War, one of the Cold War conflicts that had existed between the United States and Vietnam over the issue of containment and communism, and specifically looking at the theories of the domino theory, George Kennan, and the American fear that the Soviet Union would take over larger spheres of influence in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. By contrast, the Vietnamese, for them, in many ways, was a struggle against colonial imperialist oversight dating back to the 1950s. By 1954, the Vietnamese had been fighting the French for their independence. Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Viet Minh, had advocated to have a seat at the table with the European and American powers to gain their independence. First World War, the Second World War, it did not happen. So for him, it really became a struggle over freedom and how to get freedom for the Vietnamese people. The image on the left really is speaking more to the War of the Roses between the English and the French. We're looking at the medieval period. And although it may not be as obvious in terms of the environmental consequences as the image of chemical defoliation, we can clearly see the role of using natural resources, wood, iron, stone, to create construction, to create the shields, to create the weapons, to create the armor, to create the weapons, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is what the assignment looks like. I did post it on Friday for you all to look at. So this is EP World Remote Seminar number 1. It will be Tuesday at 2 p.m. And I did reduce the length of it a little bit. So part 1 is typically the same as our usual seminars. It's from Jared McNeil's A Companion to Global History. Part 2, instead of doing 2 separate quotes, I'm going to ask you just to do 1 and to consider making a text-to-self or a text-to-world connection. So some of the questions that I have pre-planned for our seminar, and you're welcome to borrow from them, considering Tucker's thesis as it relates to the significance of warfare on shaping the environment. Keep in mind also what his bias is as a writer and how that influences his perspective. Considering how military historians look at specific things when looking at the environment. Thinking about the Mughal army, if we're thinking about the Mughal Empire, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, the Imperial Army was a mobile city of nearly 1 million fighters, camp followers, and suppliers who stripped wide areas of everything useful as they moved. This Another interesting quote in terms of the first bullet point: the introduction of industrialized warfare, IED devices, and I kind of gave you a reference to the page you should look at. The significance of scorched earth policies from the United States in the Civil War, the campaigns in Savannah, Georgia, Sherman, to Saddam Hussein with the Tigris and Euphrates rivers dealing with his enemies. And then for the summary, kind of thinking about this larger quote, page 5, chemical warfare increased the size of chemical industries, demonstrated the value of scientific research to chemists and governments, and helped inspire post-war pesticides. And kind of considering that in conjunction with the Green Revolution of the second half of the 20th century, how that revolutionized farming, agricultural, food production, along with the origins and the creation of the environmental rights movement, particularly once DDT was introduced into the environment. It did produce a pretty large backlash in the environmental community, notably with the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring in 1962, which is really a fascinating read, by the way, thinking about the role of DDT in literally destroying the bird populations in North America and other places of the world, and how that really helped galvanize, in many cases, similar to the progressive movement of the early 20th century, the creation of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, clean air laws, and all of this under a Republican administration of Richard Nixon in the 1970s, 1971. So there's a lot to kind of think about. So I look forward to our conversation on Zoom, just to show you the assignment again, part one, part two, part three. And again, it's a slightly reduced amount of writing, but I still want you to really think about the key ideas that are brought up in this article. I look forward to our Zoom conference. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Take care.